Folks, so today is the 7th of February, and I'd like to make a follow-up to the video I just made about the GOP insanity. Now, let me just say that the news following the impeachment trial, the acquittal of Trump on both charges, both of abuse of power and obstruction of justice, obstruction of Congress, has been interesting, a lot of it predictable in many ways, and the fallout has been pretty severe. If you listen to Donald Trump, you would think the Democrats are the worst thing since Cain and Abel. The Democrats are all pointing fingers at the Republicans, saying that if they can't convict Trump for abuse of power, then what can they convict him for? And the really bad thing about it is that a lot of the Republicans fully agree that Trump abused his power. I mean, sorry, I'm sitting next to this road here. There's some really interesting dynamics playing out here in that two things. I feel like the Democratic equivalent of Rush Limbaugh, maybe, I don't know, the guys on MSNBC. But anyway, first of all, every Republican voted to deny the obstruction of Congress charge. Okay? While clearly Trump and his administration busted their asses to obstruct Congress. And Trump bragged about the fact that the Democrats in Congress did not have all of the information related to this issue of quid pro quo. The worst thing, if you look at the comedians and so forth, Trevor Noah, Stephen Colbert, the guy from Saturday Night Live, I forgot his name, and they all are very happy to point out all the flaws. I mean, they're actually, in a way, better than the news. They're happy to point out all the flaws and everything that happened about this case, looking at it day to day and just talking about all the stuff that's going on. And one of the things that they've said repeatedly is that Trump is excessively good at mocking and insulting his political rivals and exceptionally good at complimenting those who support him. But what he is also very bad at is just admitting what he did at first, instead of having it pulled from him like a long tapeworm. And even then he wants to say that he did nothing wrong and that he's being victimized, it's a witch hunt or whatever. He's still talking about a witch hunt, okay? His theme here is witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. Now I'm not gonna go and pull up all the New York Post stories about this. Yesterday I could, but he mentioned the New York Post repeatedly and the support he got from the New York Post in the comments that he made to a group of GOP supporters, donors, at a meeting following the State of the Union address. And it's almost like, here we are, we're home free, let's let this shit hit, let's start throwing mud. And the predictable sausages all came out. Coney lied, Hillary lied, the Bidens lied, Congress lied, Schiff lied. Everybody on the Democrat side, everyone who's attacked Trump is a lying scumbag, lowlife, dirty, rotten, nasty person. And Trump is just this clean altar boy, okay, who's being victimized by all these people. And what is it that pretty much everyone knows in the world when someone keeps crying wolf over and over and over again? The odds are that there isn't a wolf. When they keep saying fire, 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 fire over and over again, the odds are that either there isn't a fire or they set the fire themselves. Trump seems to be unable to understand the distinction between a rational complaint and an irrational complaint. And as many people have said, he seems to be simply lashing out at people who criticize him and laying, large amounts of support and pleasure, praise on those who support him, regardless of what he does. Okay, and this is the thing. So now everyone's got an opinion on this, and I'm sure that this has all come down to a partisan thing because basically of that very problem. But I want to point out some things, some facts. Okay, reducing all these issues to two words: the subject lied, the FBI lied, Hillary lied, Comey lied, Congress lied, Schiff lied, Pelosi lied, all these things. Isn't that a slight oversimplification, or is it a gross oversimplification? The Bidens lied. It really does beg the question of whether you're going to look deeper into the issue and care about the facts or not, or whether you're going to say, well, they did lie about this, they did lie about that, and therefore, blackwash everything they said, their entire persona. But if you're going to do that, why not do it about Trump and the GOP also? Okay, the thing here is that even his own Republican GOP jackboot locked in step party still criticized him for what he did, yet they're having trouble putting together a censure for him because half of the party is saying it doesn't matter what he did, we're going to support him. He's our president and we're going to support him. We want his policies in place and we're going to support him to make sure those policies are in place. And this is driving an attack on Romney simply for voting for a conviction on the impeachment charge on abuse of power. Simply for saying, yes, he did do it, and if he did do it, then we should actually find him guilty. As opposed to, yes, he did do it, but despite the fact that he did it, we're not going to find him guilty because that would mean removing him. And he would be the first president actually removed from office under impeachment trial, and we don't want that to happen. Or we think that's a little bit excessive, but we imagine that he's learned his lesson. Trump came out the very next day in front of all these donors and made it very clear that he didn't learn his lesson from this. And make it very clear that he didn't think he did anything wrong. Very clear that he would do the exact same thing again. And very clear that if anyone was going to be punished by it, it was going to be the people who criticized him for it. Okay? Now, the problem here, and I really feel like this is important, is all these things became issues. Comey, the FBI, Clinton, the Bidens, all these things became issues because of the personal interests of the people involved. Comey never really respected Trump. Clinton obviously was a direct competitor to Trump. There were certain FBI agents who made up evidence against Trump. They're on our records who did it. And there are certainly factors in this where Trump is right. Factors, not the entire case, certainly not even the majority of the case. The majority of the case was based upon a legitimate complaint by all these people that Trump and his family were seriously influenced by the Russians and by Russian businessmen, may even have been in the pocket of Russian businessmen, including the Russian government, including Vladimir Putin, okay? And they didn't want to admit any of this. And I don't know how many people remember this. I remember this is a while ago, but for the first 2 years of Trump's candidacy and president, people were laughing at him because he had such a bad record in New York City and in terms of his own personal finances, and he had such obvious connections to the Russians. His wife was Eastern European, his first wife was Russian. There were just obvious connections to the Russians, not to mention the mafia, not to mention all of his bad investments in Atlantic City. He just wasn't a credible candidate to anyone who really took the time to know him and to understand his background. But there were a lot of people who looked at him and said, oh, he's a billionaire. He's exactly the kind of guy, and he's not a politician. He's exactly the kind of guy we need to go in there and fight for us. The question is, does any rich businessman actually run for political office to fight for the people? Or just to fight for their friends in business? And of all the people in the world, I think Donald Trump as a businessman has probably one of the most sketchy records of anyone who was actually elected to public office in the United States in the last 50 years, since the end of Prohibition. So I just want to read off a few things. Okay, so I mentioned that Utah GOP representative for Utah wants to censure Romney for voting to convict Trump on abuse of power count. There is also another senator or senator, I believe, who wants to censure Trump for the abuse of power. Not remove him from office, but at least censure him. He's trying to get the GOP to stand behind at least a censure for Trump. On the other hand, there are members of the GOP who swear that if the GOP takes control of the House, they are going to issue a expungement for Trump on the charges that were under impeachment. I don't know if you can actually go back in time and undo the impeachment, the fact that he was impeached, but I'm sure that the GOP will work out a way to do it. Maybe they'll give him a Medal of Freedom or something. Anyway, so the next thing is that the other day, ICE agents, I should say, were attempting to arrest a illegal immigrant in New York City, and in the process of attempting to arrest that person, one of his family members got involved with the arrest and distracted officers. And while that officers were distracted, the man they were trying to arrest reached and took a gun out of the holster of one of the ICE agents, and in wrestling for the gun, the guy was shot in the face. Now, I saw this story, I was like, shot in the face. I said, oh, okay, fine, shot in the face, let's see what happened. Looked at it, and sure enough, what happened was this guy had been deported twice from the United States. Okay, now this is in New York, and New York's a sanctuary city, and the sanctuary city issue is definitely an issue, there's no question. But ICE went to the guy's house, found him, and they were in the process of arresting him and taking him into custody. And that's all well and good, but the real issue is he's already been deported twice, okay? Why is it that they think that there's going to be anything different about it this time? This is another issue that Trump has talked loads about, I mean, a whole lot about. But after 3 years in office, when they're still arresting people who have been deported multiple times, it doesn't look like anything's really changed. Essentially, we have Trump now making issues about Biden that are essentially the mirror images of the issues that were made about him and his family with Russia. And you really have to wonder if people are going to actually ask why Hunter Biden was making $85K a week for the Ukrainians just to sit on a board and raise the issue of whether he earned that money, whether it was excessive money, or whether he was, giving inside access to the Bidens, at least, if not the Obama administration, or certainly the Bidens today, either before 2016 or after 2016, then why don't they ask the same question about Kushner and Ivanka Trump and Paul Manafort and their influence in Michael Cohen, so forth, their influence with Trump. Now remember, Trump has had like 10 of his associates convicted for numerous felonies and sent to federal prison for lying to Congress and obstruction of justice regarding those business contacts. It's not over. They're still actually pursuing these things and prosecuting members of Trump's inner circle for this. Why is it that he wants to make a big deal out of looking for corruption in the Bidens, and that's his cover for the whole issue, but still obstructs Congress and the DOJ and New York State Attorney General's office when it comes to investigating corruption in his own administration? So it's really interesting how this all works, and I think that there's more to be looked at about this, because it just makes the obvious case that Democratic candidates are going to bring up in this election year. So how does Trump compensate for this? By mudslinging back at the Democrats, okay? And ultimately what he's going to do, and I think this is a pretty clear case, he's going to say, do you like the economy? Do you like what I've done for you? Do you like the way the direction this country is going? Or do you want to look at a socialist candidate who's going to take this country and wreck it? And so this is where I got into this discussion with my friend, the Trump supporter that I already posted in my videos. We are a socialist country. We have been a socialist country for a long time, and to try to portray socialists as Marxists or Marxist-Leninists is just ridiculous. Sure, that may have been where it started. Yes, everything in terms of socialism evolved from Marxism. Okay, but it wasn't just from Marxism, it was also from other governments and economic societies throughout world history. The idea of communism or commune living or whatever is not the same as totalitarian communism like Marxist-Leninism. There's a wide spread of economic range between pure capitalism and pure totalitarianism, communism, okay? Mao, I am sure, and Marx, I am very sure, are sitting back looking at this whole scenario and smiling and clapping their hands, because Trump is doing nothing more than proving Bernie Sanders' case at this point. He's doing nothing more than proving the influence, not just of partisan elections, but of capitalist elections that are driven by greed and the desire to conform and the desire to force conformity among the so-called free voters by influencing them with money and power, okay? And it all becomes a matter of interest. This is exactly what Mao has lectured about through his life, and exactly why Mao killed 40 million Chinese to eradicate this. Okay, this whole proletarian instinct was what the Red Purge was all about. Now, so you can talk about fascism, you can go back to the Nazis, you can go back to Mussolini, you can go back to the British, and the British basically nearly wiping out their entire economy, just trying to defeat the powers of fascism. And then you can go to Stalin doing, largely the same thing to defeat the powers of fascism. And the Nazis were, if nothing but capitalists, if nothing else but capitalists. There are plenty of capitalist regimes throughout history that were totalitarian, that relied on total conformity with the system, where if you're going to make an example of what's wrong with this whole idea, you have to look at Nazi Germany, where it was either you were a Nazi or you were dead, or you're very close to dead or dying on the way out. And certainly while you're on the way out, they took every asset you had. So the funny thing about this all is that, yes, we defeated the powers of Nazi Germany and also the Imperial Japanese power, but we defeated the Japanese out of racism and the Germans as a side issue. The Nazis had a lot of support in this country before the war started. A whole lot of support. And Woodrow Wilson and FDR only looked at the fact, sorry, was it FDR? I guess it was FDR. FDR basically got us into the war against Nazi Germany on the backs of the war against the Japanese. If the Germans had not actually declared war on the United States, we would have been left on the sidelines having to decide whether to support the Nazis or support the British. And in the end, the Nazis and the British got into a war, and the British won with our assistance and also the assistance of the Soviets, who they were having a cultural war with, an economic war to begin with, ended up siding with us and siding with the Soviets to defeat the Nazis. And then in the end, they sold Stalin jet engine technology that they used to develop the MiG-15 fighter, which was used to shoot down American bombers in the war in Korea. Okay, so that engine powered the MiG-15, MiG-17, MiG-19, MiG-21 fighters that were all used to shoot down American pilots over the Far East, in tropical China, tropical Asia. So it all comes around. Okay, the problem that we have here is as long as money is involved, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about capitalism or communism or socialism. What really matters is when you start talking about corruption. Okay, and the really central issue is who is actually working in favor of the voters and who is working in favor of the wealthy. Because the wealthy in this country, I'm sorry, we have wealthy people in this country, but they're 1% of the population. Okay, that's all there is to it. So what we have here, I think, is a very clear distinction between Trump trying to bribe the American people and say it's good for them and good for the country, and the socialists on the Democratic side trying to redistribute the wealth of the wealthy, of the top 1%, and say that's good for everybody. Okay, now which do you think makes more sense? Borrowing against the American credit and running huge deficits to make the wealthy even more rich and hoping that trickles down to the middle class and the lower class, economic classes, sorry. Or not borrowing against the American credit, taxing the wealthy who were ridiculously wealthy and spreading some of that wealth among the rest of the country. Actually, also giving them an incentive to continue investing in American industry, which they would have done anyway. Okay, and the irony is that I have discussed this with my friend, who is a Trump supporter, and he talked about all these economic numbers, GDP versus deficits and so forth, and ultimately, he made me look at Warren's plan in detail. And the truth is that Warren's plan, while it does involve raising some taxes on some people, still turns out to be cheaper than Trump's in the long run. And Trump's plan has already been exposed as complete bullshit. He promised 6% economic growth, which was never going to happen. His promises for reducing the deficit, likewise, are complete bullshit. He promised to reduce the deficit and spike economic growth, neither of which is going to happen under Trump. Okay, all of his promises are things are good now. They're going to be better if you elect me up to another term. And it's not at all clear that, I would say it's pretty clear that 99% of what Trump says is bullshit. And he has mastered the art of the utter fraud, and that he will promise people exactly what they want and tell them it'll cost them almost nothing as long as they keep him in power. He has become the ultimate lying GOP politician. Painless success. We know that people in this country are not going to profit from a painless exercise. They will profit if they make smart decisions and they work hard in their own interests. It doesn't mean that if they break the law, they're going to succeed, and it doesn't mean that if they don't contribute to our economic recovery that they won't succeed. And yes, that's true. A lot of people in this country are good people and have worked hard and have contributed to our economic success and not broken the law. Trump has taken credit for all of it. That's the real problem. He has taken credit for every good thing that's happened in this country while denying responsibility for any bad thing. And certainly for, just like he's done with his own family, everything bad they've done, he dismisses and blames on other people. Everything good they've done, he talks up as if it's a great thing. Okay? Jared Kushner has spent 3 years talking about peace in the Palestinian conflict, come up with the same nonsense that everybody else who's talked about the Palestinian conflict has said, that the Palestinians need to accept some kind of compromise And if they don't, they're the problem. Same thing with the Israelis. They need to offer some kind of compromise. If they don't, they're the problem. It's like, gee, it only took 40 years plus another 3 years of you looking at the situation to come up with that solution. What is this guy doing as our foreign policy ambassador? What is Ivanka? She's talked about stopping white slavery. Really? She's talked about stopping domestic violence. Really? Like, we don't already have any social policies in this country or social programs in this country to talk about white slavery and domestic violence. The whole problem with this guy is that at some point, like all scammers, they have to deliver or be exposed. And all Trump can do is complain about the people who point this out to the rest of the world. That's his entire shtick. He's the world's biggest Ponzi schemer. He keeps taking people in who continue to think that this will work out, and then complains and criticizes the people who point out that he's nothing but a giant Burning Man off. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2020 in the elections. But the bottom line is, the GOP policy is empty. It's empty. It's an empty promise, which is about to run out of opportunity to even continue. And on top of that, Trump's going to be a lame duck president anyway. And what we're going to find out is that Trump will be marginalized. The GOP party itself will start to take credit for everything that Trump does, and that Trump will start to battle with the GOP policy, his own party, in pointing fingers at each other, while the Democrats are sitting back going, gee, which one of you guys actually wants to work for the benefit of this country? We can't get anything done with you. And then both of them start attacking the Democrats again. And we go into this vicious cycle. It isn't going to get anywhere. And I'm really hoping that Trump will not run for a second term. I'm not saying it just because I don't like the guy. I clearly don't like the guy. I think it's in the interest of the country that he doesn't run for a second term. I think it's simply time. He's a 76-year-old guy. He needs to step aside and let somebody else run the country. I mean, he's going to have to do it in 4 years, even if he wins. And there's a very good chance that if he does win, he will not be a leader of the party in 2022 even. So the one thing I will say is I am not for Sanders or Trump, maybe not even Bloomberg in this election, because I feel that they are too old and they are too exposed to corporate business interests to truly be independent, forward thinkers who can operate in the best interests of the American people. I think they all have their albatrosses around their necks. Bloomberg is being attacked by Warren, at least, for buying the election. I'm sorry, but buying ads is what political candidates do. And if people see his ads and decide to vote for him, that's not the same thing as they're being paid to vote for him. He's not buying. That whole thing is just ludicrous. It comes from someone who's saying, I'm not going to take political contributions for political ads because I don't want to look like I'm beholden to political campaign donors. Well, guess what, Warren? When you lose this election, okay, that's the first thing that they're going to say. Okay, you turn down the big money contributions that could have gotten you the election. Okay, and if you honestly think that you're going to win this election over Biden and Sanders and Trump, you honestly believe this, I think you've got some hard lessons coming your way. Okay, now, I mean, honestly, you've got to get the nomination of your own party first. Okay, and if Bloomberg wins the nomination, no one's going to give a rat's ass what you say. They're going to say he did what he needed to do to win the nomination. He's still got to beat Trump. Okay, so believe me, they're going to be spending a fortune on political ads in this campaign. There's no way that you can really win the presidency in this day and age without doing that. And your campaign as someone who's not taking large political campaign contributions is essentially saying, I am not a serious political candidate for presidency. So we'll see. It'll be fun.